Hello everybody, welcome to Crafty Soup. My name is Misty and I'm here with the Mixed Media Frenzy group for the monthly hop at the end of the month. And here is the inspiration piece we are using. So I noticed big circle design, lots of sparkle, and some stenciling, and a few other tidbits. So I am going to pick up on some of those elements as I move into my project. I do go ahead and start with, this is a circle template I cut out on my Cricut machine. I save it and use it over and over again. I did draw a pencil line in there and then I lightly erased it. It's a little hard to see on camera, but there is a very faint pencil line there. And that's because I'm going to be putting a bunch of media over the top of this. Now, as is typical for me, I can't keep enough white space on my project, so I'm going to fill up this layout with more than one photo, and I'm going to go the opposite of white space, which is what I tend to do. So I am giving myself a little bit of marks with those photos so that I don't waste my time putting the medium where those photos are going to cover everything up. So today I'm using Liquitex gel medium, matte gel medium. And if you don't have this product, if you stick around to the end of the video, I have a little bit of a tip for you on what you can try instead. Now I have my stencil here and I'm using some post-it notes to cover up any areas that I don't want to get any medium through, and I am using a nice small pointy spreading tool, and that way I can get into the nooks and crannies of this stencil. And this is a really old stencil by the Crafter's Workshop, and it already has a bit of a circle to it, so that is helping me with my arc along this entire layout. Now the original inspiration had kind of three larger areas where it was more heavily embellished, and so that's part of what I'm doing here with my stenciling, is that I'm going with a couple of zones of heavier embellishing. And then I do let that dry overnight. It probably doesn't need that long to dry, probably just a couple of hours. The gel medium tends to dry faster than some of the other mediums I've noticed. So I do erase my pencil marks as much as I can, and I'm moving on to the next step, which is some foiling with glue. And so I have done this technique before, and I just spread a little bit of this dual purpose glue. Now this one is from scrapbook.com, and the point of this glue is that it stays tacky once it's dry, and that's going to allow me to do some foiling on top. I did pull out this stamp set. It's an older stamp set, I believe from Hip Kit Club. And these are just three tiny stars here, and I'm stamping in between the zones of the stenciling that I did. And there is a little bit of trick to stamping with glue. Outline stamps work better because when you have a solid stamp and you push down, it kind of squidges the glue away from the center of the solid image. That is okay for what I'm doing here, because what's going to happen is I'm going to get a variety of texture of stars. So I will get some that look more outlined, some that look more splodgy, and some that will look like complete stars. Now I do let that glue dry for a couple of hours, and then we're ready to move on to the foiling. I do keep all of my leftover bits of foil in a little Ziploc bag, and they come in really handy for techniques like this where you don't need a perfectly smooth, clean sheet of foil. And what I'm going to do is just touch different colors. I'm using red, gold, and kind of a coppery color to areas of that sticky but now dry glue. And that will pick up just little bits of foil, and then once I have little bits of one color, I will use the next sheet of foil and add in little bits of the other color, and that way my stars have a multi-tinted hue to them, and I like that. And here you can see I've decided to speed it up a little bit and just do all my red at once, and then go back and do a little bit of gold and a little bit of copper to fill in the rest. So that is how I am getting my foiling done, and I will show you a little bit of a close-up of this here in just a minute, and you can see what I was talking about with some of those stars being more open, some of them being more solid, some of them being a little less clearly star-shaped, but I'm okay with that because this is kind of a flowy mixed media technique. Speaking of which, we're moving on to the next part of my technique. Now, there wasn't watercolor in the demo, but I'm a watercolor person, so you're going to get my take on things. I am spraying my paper with a little bit of water to help this watercolor paint start to flow, and that's going to flow into cracks and grooves of that stenciling that we did. I'm also using a salt technique. This is a little cup of kosher salt, and the reason I'm using kosher salt is that it has larger crystals than a table salt, and it works a little bit better than a table salt would for this technique. And I'll show you a little bit of the details of what that salt does to the paint. Now, I did just recently do a video on experimenting with this salt technique as well as some alcohol with watercolors. And if you're interested in that, I will link you up in the corner, or you can find the link in the show notes and check out that video. Now, sometimes I had too much water on my paper and I have my handy towel to clean up that excess. Watercolor is always a balance between just enough water for the technique you're trying to do and not too much water. So I am careful about keeping my water under control. I am working on Vicki Boutin mixed media paper, which does not work as well for watercoloring as an actual watercolor paper. The Vicki Boutin paper tends to soak in the water faster than a watercolor paper does. So that is why I'm working in small little sections as I go around this layout, so that I have time to go ahead and add my salt, because if the paint is too dry when you add that salt, it's not going to do its magical thing. So I just turn my paper as I go and work in smallish sections so that I can get to the end result that I'm looking for. So I've made it all the way around my circle, and then I'm just going to clean up a bit, and this needs to dry. Now, you can't speed up any of these drying techniques with the heat gun, or at least I don't like to, because the salt technique doesn't work as well, and then the other mediums like the glue and the paste can bubble up if you get them too hot. So I let these dry naturally. This one took a couple of hours to dry, and then I rub off all that excess salt with my fingers. And here I'm trying to show you the difference between a smooth wash of paint and places where the salt kind of made the edges jaggedy. We'll get a couple more close-ups of that in just a moment. So the next step of my process is to take my scrap towel, just spritz the towel a tiny bit where my finger is, and then rub over that gel medium just to buff off any excess paint that's covering up the gel, because that gives you a little bit more crispness to your image. This is a totally optional step, but I like it because the gel doesn't 100% resist the paint, and that way if you buff it off, you get more of that crisp image. And then I am finishing up with a few details that I noticed from the inspiration piece. There were some doilies, there was just a little bit of matted paper around, and then the sparkle. So I'm using a combination of sequins and these little, I don't remember what they're called, maybe dewdrops or something. If I can remember where I bought those, I will link you up to that product. And then the inspiration piece also had a sparkle in its title, so I pulled out a couple of choices and went with this lighter color. And then I don't even feel like I need much journaling on this page, because the title kind of says it all. These were all our college kids home for Thanksgiving. So here is the final look at this project. You can see the overall view, and I like how those leaves are a bit subtle. And then you can see the closer view of all of the stenciling and the foiling and the sequins that bring all of this together. I did say I would give you a little bit of a close-up of this salt technique, and that is illustrated best by this bottom portion of the photo. So here I'm zooming in on what that paint looks like with this salt technique, and you can see those kind of jaggedy edges, versus if I shift over this way a little bit, you see much more of a smooth, flowy paint look. So you can get interesting techniques by using salt. And if you want more info, I recommend you go check out my video from yesterday. Again, I'll link you up. Now, earlier in the video, I did say if you don't have this gel matte medium, you can use something else, and that something else is glue. And for this, I tested out 3 different glues. I brought the Gina K Connect glue, the glue that's called Art Glitter Glue, and then the glue by Nuvo. And I put those all through a stencil, and then I let them dry, watercolor washed over them. And here in the center of this paper is the gel matte medium. So you can see the example of all of these next to each other. And I'd say if you don't have the gel medium, Try some glue, you'll probably have good results. Do remember that this is a hop for the Mixed Media Frenzy group, so I've got you linked up below to the other crafters on this hop. As of this voiceover, there's only a few of us this month, so you'll have plenty of time to check everybody out. If you're already a subscriber, thanks so much for being here, and if you're new and liked this video, I hope you'll subscribe and join me for future videos. Thanks for watching, I'll see you later.